Well, now that we're done with exercise 2, let's move into exercise 3 for day 3. Now, just to bring you up to speed, remember that we already have our virtual machine running, we've made a copy of the IP address that's in use, and we've proven that we can successfully connect to it. Additionally, I currently have my system configured to talk through the Burp Intruder interface. And the way that I can verify that is by going into the Tools, Internet Options, and then under Connections, verifying that I'm currently configured to go through port 8080. That's where Burp runs, whereas WebScarab runs on port 8008. All right, so we're now at the bank, and we need to actually log into it. So I'm going to go back to the main page, because there actually is login information there. Whoops, I forgot to put in the bank URL. Excellent. And let's use this account down here. So I'll just copy that and make note of the PIN or password 4321. And I'll click on the login link. Now that's taken us already to page 82 in the exercise, where we'll now paste in that account number and the 4321. Just a note, as you paste this in, it is worthwhile to verify that you didn't accidentally pick up an extra space on the end of the account number. If you did, I think it might actually impact your ability to log in. So if this fails, you will want to just double check, make sure there are no extra characters surrounding the account number. Then I'll log in. Now, as mentioned, we really need to fuzz the entire application. Every single URL, every page, particularly pages that are looking for input. However, we're going to walk through how to test a specific page, and then you would then expand that to the other pages found within the system. For instance, the login page that we just went through, that too would need to have a fuzz run against it. Now that I'm logged in though, and we're at the Welcome to Miss Alice page, on page 83 it asks us to please click on the Transfer Funds account. So I'll click on that, and we can see the interface that tells us our current balances, as well as allowing us to select and make a transfer. Now, it is possible to manually create the entire attack. However, that's a lot of work. And frankly, even when doing web app penetration testing, it is somewhat unusual for me to start with that. More often, I would look and see how the form normally behaves, and then start making adjustments from there. And that's exactly the approach we're going to take here, and it is the same approach we would take as an auditor. So let me just enter an amount to transfer. I'll say $5, submit query. It says that it's managed to, oh wait, sorry, I did forget to do something there. Let me go back. I forgot to select an account to transfer to. And apparently on page 85, I was supposed to make that mistake, so that's good. Let me pick a second account, and I will now pick an amount. And this time, before I actually send that, I'm going to go into my Burp interface here and just scoot it over so I can see it and click on History. And the reason I'm doing this, I'm going to go way down to the bottom here, is that in my experience, I have found that filling out a form and then clicking Submit may not generate one request. It could actually generate 10, 20, maybe even 50 or 60 different requests, just depending how the application is built and where it has to get pieces from. So I'm in the habit of just checking where we are right now. We're currently at request number 54 before I submit. Now in this particular case, let's come back here and see what happened. It only sends one request, number 55. So that's good news. That would be easy to deal with. But I have that habit because if it did generate 50 or 60, now I'd have to go back and figure out which one is the one I actually generated where I sent my data in. Well, I know for sure it's this one because that's the last thing that was sent. Now, we already know that I can view the data that was sent, and I could have even intercepted it and manipulated it by turning intercept on over here, but that's really for later. When we're first doing this application testing, unless you know for sure something you want to try, it's much easier to simply right-click on this and send it to the intruder. Now when I do that, you'll see my little Intruder tab lights up. And this direction actually appears on page 86. So let's move over there to the Intruder tab. and it has already moved us into the second tab. The first tab is here by default, and there's nothing in it. It's just a sample, but you could write one manually there. Number 2, however, you'll see already has my host address in it. It already has the request that we saw over in the other window here, as well as having options for me to configure to do the attack. Now, when we run this by sending it to the intruder, one of the things that Burp will do automatically, we can see here, and it's talked about there on page 87. It will automatically mark, using these little section markers, it will automatically mark everything that it sees as input. Now, there may be more things that you'd like to manipulate that are not marked automatically. For example, note the refer. Even in class, we saw an example of an application that is apparently relying on the referrer for some information. Given that information, this would be a wonderful thing to manipulate to see if we can get it to misbehave. However, to start with, I do not want it to manipulate everything on the page. The reason is, well, let's look at what's going on here. We have the transfer transaction. We have a session ID that's currently keeping us logged in, which we'll talk about in the next section of our course. Some account information, I'm not sure what that's related to. And then down here, from and to. And this data happens to be MIME encoded. Not that that's particularly important, it's just a different approach towards sending us the form data. Rather than sending it in the URL, or in the post in the body, it is still here using a post, but has MIME encoded it. In this case, we can see the from account, the to account, and the amount. And then we can see that there's actually another option being called, transfer to, and then finally the submit button. Right now, what I'd like to do is test to see whether or not the transfer function works properly, and if by manipulating this data here, I can cause it to misbehave or create a change in behavior. If I leave this set at the default, it's going to manipulate all of these fields at the same time. So in other words, as soon as this value changes, or as soon as this value changes, we're no longer checking transfer. And as soon as this value changes, we're no longer logged in. So I don't want to just take the defaults initially, though eventually I will want to test all of the form elements. So how do I fix this? The easy way to do it is just click anywhere in the request and click the clear button. Now, if clicking the clear button one time just clears one thing, then you probably had that highlighted. Just click clear again, and you'll see all of these highlights disappear. With that done, we can now, as it says on page 87, simply highlight the elements that we'd like to manipulate and click on the Add button. And here's another one. So we'd like to manipulate the from and to account and the amount. Excellent. With that done, I'm going to move on to the Payloads tab, which is what we see there on page 88. Now, for page 88, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit. We're still going to use the sample list, but in the book, we're asking you to go out into Notepad or some other text editor and create a sample list of things to use for fuzzing. Personally, I don't do that every time I run an assessment. Well, how do I get strings to test with then? Well, let me show you what I do. I'm going to click on the Load button without building that list. And if we browse to where we've got our copy of our DVD, which for me is on my desktop in 507 Stuff, under Tools, Web Application Testing, there we go, you'll see that there's a file named All Attack, and I'll open that up. This is just an example file, but let me explain how it's used. When I do web application testing and I discover some string that causes a misbehavior, whether it's a cross-site scripting flaw or there's a logic flaw or a SQL flaw, whatever it is, I will take that string and add it to a master list that I maintain. That way, when I'm first doing fuzzing against an organization, I simply load up the list of all the things I've found that can be useful against web applications. This really helps me because if I come back to revalidate that application, I can automatically test for all of the things I've tested for before without having to worry that I've forgotten to test for something. And if we scroll down through this, you can see there's quite a large number of things here, all different encodings for things, and there's some JavaScript in here, and HTML encoding, and HTTP encoding, just all kinds of things. I'm just going to use that payload. Now with that done, we're actually ready to start running this test. So I'm going to pull down Intruder and tell it to start the attack. You will get a warning that the free edition of Burp is just a demo version, and that it's going to run slower. Really slower. The first couple come back relatively quickly, but after that, it really slows down. And there's just nothing you can do with the free version to make that faster. It actually gets slower with each and every request. So if you were to let this run for all 1100, you'd be sitting here for a very long time. But rather than let this run, I'm actually going to interrupt it and talk about what you would do. Whoops, didn't mean to restart it there. We'll let it run through a few. What you would do with the results that it's generating, because that's what's really interesting and shows how to use a fuzzer. So I've got a few results in there. Let me choose attack, pause. All right. You can sort all of these by columns. So the payload or the position, where things showed up, and the status message that came back, as well as the length of the response. Notice here, if I click on baseline request, the bottom window lights up, and it's showing me here's what was sent in, and here is how the server answered. In this case, funds transfer status, or if I render it, transfer successful. If I select the next one, now it says invalid account. So I can scroll through these and see how the system behaves depending on the kind of data that's here. In fact, I might say, let me narrow my test down. I probably wouldn't do this so quickly, but because we're running in the limited version, it's going to take so long to run the test, I'm just going to make an assumption. I'm looking at this saying, if it has an invalid account number, apparently it just fails. So let me stop this attack, come back in here, and make a change. I'm going to come down here to the from and clear it. Click OK, and I'll go back into payloads, and and let's try to run this again. I'll choose repeat, and I messed something up, so let's come back in here. Let's look at our payloads. Oh, I accidentally unhighlighted all of them, so let me come back and add this one in, and add this one in again, and one more time. Let's choose repeat. There we go. And I still see the baseline request coming back and should, I would think, tell me that it was successful. But what about these? Again, I'm seeing invalid account. Probably a good sign. Let's pause that again and close this up. And this time, let's just have the amount be the thing that's being manipulated. And I'll choose attack and repeat. It's a different size. In fact, I'm seeing multiple sizes. That's exactly what I'm looking for. If I sort by length, I can now compare and see what's happening because I'm getting a change in behavior. So let me make this bigger, scoot this out, and under render, balance exceeded. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so 65536 is what it tried to do, but it has a smaller balance. Well, that's good news. It should probably block that. The next one is, an even bigger number. Okay, that blocked too. That's all right. Another number. Transfer unsuccessful, not a valid monetary amount. I wonder what we sent. Now, to find out if we had a question or saw something misbehave, we can just come over to request here and scroll down, and we find that in that case, it sent a capital letter A. What would you say the likelihood is that the rest of the 3855s are pretty much the same message? Well, it sure is. And over here on the left, of course, I can see what that value is. I don't have to jump in there and see what was being sent. So now I can very quickly scroll through these, see that they're all 3855s, and let's just skip over those and look for another size. Here's one, 3894. that was a successful transfer. And I see that we were successful for a value of, let's see, in this case $5, for $0, for $1, $2, and let's see here, double $0. And that gave me a slightly different size, but we can explain why that is. My point is that I can begin using things like the length field to very quickly zero in on things that change, and at the same time skip hundreds, even thousands of results that I just don't care about. At this point I'm going to stop this one, and we've worked through this exercise except for the final piece that asks you to try to run this against the nlog tool. Now I'm not going to do that. You can try that for yourself, and I'll leave it as an exercise for you. But if you do have questions about it, feel free to just ask in class. That's it for now. Look forward to the next series of labs having to do with the afternoon material from day 3.